a very special treat for you today. My dad, Ron Simmons, is guest hosting, talking about the latest in news and politics and taking many of your questions. You guys are going to love this. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Good Ranchers. Go to goodranchers.com, code Allie at checkout. That's goodranchers.com, code Allie.
Well, hello, everyone. Probably not who you expected to see today. I'm Ron Simmons. As most of you know, I'm Allie's dad, and I'm really grateful that Allie asked me to sit in for her today. She is speaking at a pro-life event in D.C., so be praying for her today. Those are always so important for her and for what her beliefs are and for the people that are there. We just pray that, there may be one lady in the audience that's trying to make a decision on what to do about that unborn child, and that the lady will make a decision for life. And if the Lord can speak through Allie today in any way, we just pray that that'll happen. And we know that he is with her. So thank you, though, for letting me be here. I appreciate it. I know that some of you, especially after that Instagram message was sent out, probably looked like I was forcing myself on here. I was not. We had a fun time with that. And one thing we're going to do later today is we're going to get to some of your incredible questions that you had. I mean, I was just so impressed with the questions. I'm always impressed with Allie's audience. She shares occasionally things with my wife and I, Lisa, on questions and comments that she gets. I'm always so impressed, and I so much appreciate you all following her. I hope that you're reading her book. It's another great book. She's doing a great job with that. And that you just keep up and let her know what's important to you. She really does care about that. We're going to talk about several things first, though, before we get into the question. And one of the things is the law that was trying to get through the Senate by Senator Langford and Senator Banks that's called the Born Alive Survivors Protection Act. And it really is incredible to you and I that would even be any type of controversy associated with it. Now, I will tell you that there's already a federal law that says that if a baby is born alive in an attempt of an abortion, that they have to do what's medically necessary to keep them alive. However, the challenge is, and I ran into this when I was in the Texas legislature, it's great to have these laws, but if there's no penalty associated with violating that law, then why would somebody that doesn't agree with the law even follow it? And we know that they haven't. And remember the former vice presidential candidate, Tim Walz? Most of us have already forgotten about him. There were 18 born alive abortions in that state last year alone, I believe, and I don't believe they kept them alive. I mean, it's just incredible. Now, people say, well, gosh, we got 53 votes in the Senate. What more do we have to do? That's a majority. In fact, it's a pretty strong majority. But the way the Senate works, and believe me, Republicans, conservatives have benefited from this in the past. The way the Senate works is, in order for a vote on the floor to occur, they have to get 60 members to say it's okay to go ahead and vote on the bill. That's called cloture. That only doesn't happen in bills dealing with the budget. They call that reconciliation. And also it doesn't happen relating to Supreme Court justices and some other federal justices as well. They came up with an agreement a few years ago to not have to get cloture for those. It can be simple majority just to bring the vote up. So we need to somehow convince a few more senators, because I believe every single one voted against that, 47 Democrat senators, which is incredible that this would even be controversial. But, what happens is, and the reason that they do this, I'll just explain it to you, and we probably talked about it before. Most of the Senate seats and the House seats, and it's probably the same way in your legislature, wherever you are, state legislatures, those seats are probably always, at least now, going to be Democrat or Republican. And so they're not really worried about what happens in the general election. In other words, if I live in New York, I promise you Chuck Schumer doesn't care about anything that I say as a conservative. He's only worried about what happens in his primary, meaning when it's only Democrats voting to determine who's going to go on to the general election. And so what happens in these primaries, the candidate on the Democrat side that's furthest to the left usually wins. Now, we hope that's changing based on what happened in this last presidential election with President Trump winning so many areas that had been controlled by Democrats, especially in the U.S. House. We saw it down in South Texas. We saw it in other parts of the country as well. So we hope that more reasonable even if they're a Democrat, more reasonable Democrats could be elected. And I know that there are pro-life Democrats out there, but they just can't win races right now. And so that's what the 47 in my mind, that's the calculation that they were going through is, okay, what's it going to cost me at the ballot box? Now, let me remind you, all right, and this is a generalization, so don't send Allie a bunch of messages about your senator or your House member doesn't do this. Generally, the number one rule of an elected official when they look at something is how is it going to affect my reelection? And interestingly enough, that's also their number 2 rule. And their number 3 rule is see number 2 and see number 1. That's just the way it works. I mean, when I was in the legislature, one of the things that was my goal is to try to determine whether or not you could still be a statesman and be in the House, or a stateswoman. You understand what I'm saying? And I'll tell you, it's very, very hard. In my last race, which I lost in the general election, even though I beat my U.S. senator by 10 points, I lost it because I filed some bills that were controversial. And this was in 2017. Yes, 2017. And one of those bills was related to gender. I passed what we used to call the bathroom bill, and or tried to pass it. And so that was negative. Also tried to pass a school choice bill. And then I got pushed back on that as well. So, there are some that, we'll say, okay, it's worth the risk. This is an important enough subject. But mostly they're looking to see how they can get reelected. Now, the Born Alive bill shouldn't have been one of those that they were concerned about. I don't think they would lose one vote for saying, hey, I voted to put real penalties in for babies that are born alive during a abortion procedure to keep them alive. And if they don't do it, there's a penalty that goes to the doctor or the caregiver that's responsible for that. But we'll just have to keep watching. It doesn't mean just because it hasn't gotten a vote yet that it won't get a vote. It also doesn't mean that they can't attach this to another bill that's going to get a vote on. They could attach this as an amendment, and possibly they'll get that done. But that kind of leads us into, when we're talking about pro-life, this is, we at our church, and probably at yours too, last Sunday was Pro-Life Sunday, and this is actually a pro-life week, and that's why Allie is in Washington, D.C. There's a lot states that are having pro-life days on Saturday. I hope if your state's having one at your capital and you can get to it, you would go to that. I know they are having one in Texas, which I think is very exciting, and it's always a great turnout. But that leads us a little bit into this birthright citizenship. Man, this was exciting. When I was going through some of the various executive orders that they talked about, that Trump signed, they were talking about. And I'd heard this birthright citizenship being something, he talked about it last time in his last term, and I've heard about it before. And so I got to doing a little bit of research on it. And, I will tell you up front, it's a steep hill to climb to get this passed. No question about it. It's a steep hill. But here's what happens. The reason you go through this, because what is it, 22 attorneys generals in blue states and Democrat states filed a lawsuit day one of Trump's presidency in this second term to not allow that to happen. And so what he is saying is that if you read the 14th Amendment, it says that a person is a citizen if they're under the jurisdiction of the United States or a state. And the argument is that his argument is there as an illegal they're not under the jurisdiction. They don't have any rights, so to speak. And so therefore that baby should not be considered a legal citizen. Now, if their parents were here as a resident alien, like a green card holder, and the baby was born, that's different. They would be a citizen because they are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and a state. Now, there are a couple of court cases, in fact, one back as far as I think 1898, that is a hurdle they're going to have to overcome. And you can read about that case. You just Google that and it'll tell you all about it. What the court appears to say at that time is that a resident alien who has a baby, that's the way I interpret it, then that baby is a citizen. Okay. Now, a resident alien is someone, in my opinion, that should be defined as being here legally. I think that's how we would define a resident alien. There have been a couple of cases since then, I think in as late as 1982, where far left Supreme Court Justice Brennan writes that, no, that's really not the case, that anyone here, because we give them medical, an illegal alien can go to a hospital or to the emergency room and be treated. And because we allow them to attend our schools, those are federal laws or federal court decisions that came down that require that, then therefore they are under our jurisdiction and should be considered citizens if they are born here. So we're going to see how that all works out.
First sponsor for the day is We Heart Nutrition. I love We Heart Nutrition. This is the best place to get women's vitamins. However, it's not just for women. Now they also have supplements for men. Chief Relatable has been taking these supplements. He really likes them. We just love that all of the ingredients in these vitamins come in the most bioavailable form. That means that our bodies are really absorbing the nutrients and the supplements that we're taking. No one wants to waste time taking a bunch of pills if they're not really working. I had blood work done a few months ago, and for the first time, like ever, I was told that my iron levels are optimal. I've always been anemic. I've taken all different kinds of iron supplements. This is the first one that has worked for me, and it doesn't cause any digestive problems. It's like really easy on the body, good for the body. And I've just found that with all of their products. If you go to weheartnutrition.com, you can take their 20-second quiz. You can see the vitamin regimen that is right for you. If you go to weheartnutrition.com and use code Allie, you get 20% off your order. weheartnutrition.com, code Allie.
The New York Times, of course, is all over this. They are all over, hey, they should be legal citizens, no question about it. That's what they are. Even though in every other scenario, okay, sit back and think about this one for a second. In every other scenario, they don't believe that unborn baby, which is what we've been calling them, is actually a baby. They believe it's a bunch of tissue. If you don't believe that, just go back and listen to the hearing that Allie was at, the congressional hearing a few years ago. You can look that up too, and about how those other people on the panel talk so dismissively about that sweet baby that is in a mom's belly. And the New York Times wants to go out on a limb for these, what they would call just things of tissue. We would call certainly a baby. But at the same time, the New York Times is okay with the Born Alive Survivors Protection Act not passing. Now, if there is greater hypocrisy in this world, I would love for you to tell me about it, because that is about as hypocritical a position as you can take. Make sure that you look at this New York Times article, and here is the title of the article if you want to look it up. Undocumented women ask, will my unborn child be a citizen? Key word in there is child. I mean, I don't know that the New York Times has ever positively used that term. And I would sure like to hear from them. New York Times, if you're listening, please explain that to me as to how you can call this a child and how you can call someone that wants to abort that child, nothing but just a bunch of mass of tissue. Please just tell me, okay? Ron@ronsimmons.com. You can get to me anytime. I need to know. But it's just, I'm sorry, it's just despicable if you want to know the truth. It really, really is. And you know what, though? We've made a bunch of progress. We did get Roe v. Wade overturned. We now have this whole abortion pill thing that we have to work on. And that's why we can never, ever, ever take a rest. We have to keep moving forward to protect those babies. You just don't ever know. You know, we had a speaker at our church last week, Daniel Ratcliffe, and Daniel was born with no arms. And the story that he told about, he wasn't, you know, his mom wasn't trying to have an abortion or anything like that. He just had a disability. And when he was born, and he's probably, I don't know, 35, 40 years old now, the doctor asked his dad. Now this is I'm talking about a dad stepping up. And you know, he was disappointed. They didn't know he was going to be disabled because they didn't have the testing they have today. And so this baby's born, a few minutes old. He has no arms. He's got some other issues as well with breathing. And the doctor says, "What do you want me to do?" And the dad, without hesitation, says, "I want you to do everything you can to save my son." And wow, think about that. I mean, what a dad, and how grateful, of course, that Daniel is. And he's married with kids now and got a great ministry and testimony. But nowadays, you know, people can abort their child in the womb if they have a disability. In a lot of cases, in a lot of states. And man, oh man, I think about that all the time. You know, my wife's got a book out there called I Would Have Said Yes. She self-published it a few years ago. You might still be able to find it. If you can't, just send Allie a message and we're happy to send you one. But it's, you know, we have a son that's disabled. He has seizures and he has autism and other things as well. And her whole premise of her book is, even if I'd have known all that, and we didn't know any of that, would I have still said yes? And of course, her answer is yes. In fact, he turns 40 years old tomorrow. So we're excited about that, have a little gathering for him. And we're thankful for that. And I'm thankful that my wife was so determined and so accepting of what the Lord gave us. No question about it. All right. Now, let's move on to another subject if we can. And this is on Stargate. Don't you just love the names that politicians come up with? I mean, when I think about it seemed like there was a movie called Stargate at one time. Bree, am I right about that? Do you remember that? No, it's probably before your time, wasn't it?
It was the year I was born. It was in 1994.
Do you remember seeing that?
No.
No, you don't. Okay. So Allie was just a little baby as well. Not most. So Stargate. So what I think about it, and I think that movie was about you could go through this kind of thing and travel through time. Isn't that what it was? I think that's what it was.
I couldn't even tell you.
Oh, okay.
I just looked it up.
Your mom and dad were probably watching that.
Yeah, they
right
might
after
know.
after you were born. But anyway, so Stargate is this. And I had not even heard about this. You guys may have already heard about it was going to happen. This is something that surprised me. It's a artificial intelligence AI infrastructure bill that they're, I guess, going to try to get passed. And the most interesting thing about it to me, because I never heard this happen under the Biden administration, is that $500 million of private investment. You know, usually what Biden did is, here, we're going to just give you all this money and just do whatever you want to with it, right? What he did try to do with the Green New Deal and all of the things that he gave away. But what Trump has done, and we'll talk about this, why this is a little bit later, but what Trump has done is he's gotten businesses together and they're going to invest $500 million to build kind of more like a public AI infrastructure to be used for, in their mind, the public good. Now, we're going to talk about why that's not always the case, of course. A minute ago, I think I said 500 million. I understated that. It's 500 billion. They're going to, and the guy from SoftBank says, because there's been a little discussion going on between Musk and Altman, Musk saying that Altman and those guys don't have the money. And the guy from SoftBank, I forget his name, but he said, I don't know about everybody else, but I've got my 80 billion ready to go. So I thought that was pretty funny. But that is exciting. In fact, I didn't know this either, but I was really excited to know that the very first data center, and these data centers are 500,000 square feet. Think about, if you had a 2,000 square foot house, how many houses, 500,000 square feet it would take to fill that up. It's incredibly large. And they're doing it in Abilene, Texas, which is kind of out in middle west Texas, a smaller town, probably have good access to electrical, and they probably will use some solar out there because the sun shines out there an awful lot, so they may have their own power plant. I'm not sure how all that'll work. But the interesting thing about it is one of the gentlemen that spoke is Larry Ellison, who is the head of Oracle. And he had an interesting take. I'm not sure why he brought this up, but let's listen to what he had to say on SOT1.
Once we gene sequence that cancer tumor, you can then vaccinate the person, design a vaccine for every individual person to vaccinate them against that cancer. And you can make that vaccine, that mRNA vaccine, you can make that robotically, again, using AI in about 48 hours. So imagine early cancer detection, the development of a cancer vaccine for your particular cancer aimed at you, and have that vaccine available in 48 hours. This is the promise of AI and the promise of the future.
Larry, why didn't you just call me first? We could have had such a better, you could have come across so much better. Using the word vaccine and mRNA in this day and time is a little sensitive, all right? And I'm sure that there were at least some of the people on Trump's team that were having a couple of cringe moments. Maybe not like the cringe moments he had when he was at the Episcopal Church the day before from the lady that was trying to beat him down. But so I want to make sure that we don't get off track here. What AI can do potentially in a healthcare situation, and it is really good. I think he's using the wrong term, vaccine, okay? But if you can gene sequence every person quickly, which you can, and you know what type of treatment would be best for them if they have a problem, let's say, like Lisa and I both have had cancer experiences in the last couple of years. If they knew, okay, Ron, this specifically will be your best treatment. Maybe it's all natural, right? Maybe it's nothing to do with a drug or something. Maybe it's simply all natural, which she and I both have done a lot with. Then I think that would be really important. Or if it could tell me why Daniel was having seizures, I would want to know that just to see, is there something that we can do? The mRNA vaccines, we all know that there has a lot of problems with that. And I would not want them rushing out to try to figure out, okay, 48-hour vaccine scares me to death. The last one they did in 6 or 7 months really had a negative effect on a lot of people. I'm not saying it didn't help some people. Maybe it did, but it had a negative effect on a lot of people. In fact, I think probably was behind some pretty bad turnouts for people. And so I think that was wrong. But that's not all of what this program is about. Healthcare is one of the things. There'll be other things as well that'll be used for the Defense Department. You can also use it for just simple things like, okay, traffic. What was the best solution for improving traffic in major cities? All right. And when does it make sense to have to have like buses and trains and things like that versus just having roads? That's the type of thing that it will be able to do. And so I'm really excited about seeing what happens out of it. Now, I don't want any of this AI. I'm kind of in the Elon Musk field on AI in that you have to have people that are controlling the input so that you know that the output doesn't carry bias with it. And what some people, and I've heard the guy from Google say, no, we just want to kind of let it evolve on its own. And that's why Musk left OpenAI. And I think Altman's come around a little bit to that as well. I've been reading some of his tweets and his statements on that also. So I'm excited about what's going to happen. I do think we always have to look at this with a little bit of a jaundiced eye to make sure that we have accountability relating to that. And if there's legislation, I think making sure that there's accountability within that legislation is really important. But I wouldn't over worry about what Larry Ellison said. Again, if he would have just made a quick call to me, he doesn't have my number, but we could have gotten it for him. We could have taken care of, I could have schooled him on that pretty quickly. So Larry, if you want to talk about it any further, just give us a shout. We'll talk about that.
Next sponsor is Every Life. Every Life is a pro-life diaper company. They support pro-life organizations, pregnancy centers across the country through their Buy for a Cause bundle that you can purchase through their website, everylife.com. They donate resources to pregnant moms in need. It's also where we get all of our diapers in the Stuckey household. We really like them. They're really clean, easy on the skin, but they also really work. And I love supporting a diaper company that actually supports babies. Unfortunately, a lot of these big diaper companies are actually donating to Democrat politicians, Democrat organizations that support abortion. We don't want to be a part of that when it comes to buying our diapers. Go to everylife.com. Use promo code Allie10. When you do, you'll get 10% off your first order. That's everylife.com, code Allie10.
Let's get on to some of the questions, okay, in the last part of the episode that we're going to do. And again, thank you for joining us today. I hope that you enjoy this, and I hope you'll remember, Allie's going to be back on Monday. So don't give up on her just because you may not have liked what your host did today. Don't give up on Allie. She'll be back on Monday. But, boy, we got some great questions. Look at all. This is incredible how many questions we got. And I can't get to all of them, but I'm going to get through some of them. Here's the first one. How did you raise your kids to live in peace together? Well, if you'd have been in our home when they were younger, you would have wondered that. I'll never forget Lisa telling a story of she walks in on Daniel and Allie. Now, they're 7 years apart. So Allie was probably 3, 4, 5 years old. I don't know. And Daniel would have been 11 or 12. And she walks in on them, and they both have play swords. And Daniel's saying, on guard. Now, Allie thinks he said, I'm God. And so she goes back and says, I'm Jesus. So it was pretty funny. But I think we had a typical household for young children and whatever. But I think that the biggest reason that they've actually always gotten along pretty well, there's never been any major issues between them, is that Lisa, their mom, she prayed over them. She just prayed over those kids all the time. She refereed fights in a way that was more loving than me. When I would do it, it was, okay, you're in trouble and you're in trouble. Let's go to it right now. Lisa just didn't handle things that way, and she was very, very good at that. The other thing that she did a lot of, and she still does it to this day, she laughs with them. I mean, they have so much funny stuff that they talk about, most of which doesn't even sound funny to me, right? And that's why they laugh. They laugh when I don't think it's funny because I don't think it's funny, which is kind of strange. And then finally, I think for now anyway, as adults, we do something purposely that I believe has an impact on how we see each other, is that as a family, we have a weekly Zoom call every Sunday night to get caught up with each other and to share prayer requests. That's really been important for us. Sometimes there's a week we can't do it, just doesn't fit, but we try to do that every Sunday night if we can. Next question, tips for keeping lifelong friends. I think that friends are just really important, but you just have to remember that friendship is an active verb. And if it's something where you're just going to, sit back and wait for people to call you, it's generally not going to happen. You have to pursue it. We have friends, some of the people that we first met on those first Sundays that we went to church at First Baptist Dallas, we have some of those friends still today. In fact, I was with 2 of them this morning having breakfast. And so I would just say it's an active verb and you have to pursue it. Even in the times when you have kids and you're busy and all that, if you say, okay, I'll get together then when all our kids are grown, it doesn't work like that. Here's one. I have 2 sons with cognitive disabilities. Any parenting advice for me? Well, I think the advice that Lisa and I would give you is you got to get them in the right education environment as early as possible. No matter how steep their disabilities are, they need to have the education that best fits them. And federal law requires your school district to provide that for them. And if they don't, they have to pay for them to go to private education. Do not give up on that, all right? And if your school tells you we think that what we're doing is right and you don't agree with it, you keep fighting for that. Also, you need to plan now for what will happen when they are adults. They must have something to do. Even if they can't hold down a full-time job, they need to be able to do something on a regular basis, because deep down inside of their core, they still want to feel wanted and needed and purposeful. All right. Even though they may not totally understand it intellectually and can get it out to you, they want that. And then also you need to plan for what happens when you're gone. That's the number one challenge that parents that have children that are disabled. What happens when I'm not here? I feel very comfortable that Allie and Justin, Allie and then my oldest Justin, that they'll take care of Daniel if he's still here after we leave. But I want to make sure of that, and I don't want to make it a burden. So what I've trying to do is make sure that I have financially set aside enough that he can be taken care of. All right. And I think that's important as well. And then again, I'd encourage you to read Lisa's book. I would have said yes. And again, happy to get that to you without any cost. Happy to just send that to you. Next is, what are some traits and principles you're glad stuck with Allie, and how did you help foster them when she was growing up? Again, and this is just the truth, primarily her mother's, Lisa's discipleship and her mentorship of her. Lisa and Allie were really close. Allie would share pretty much anything with with Lisa, sometimes stuff Lisa really didn't even want to hear, but Allie, what's on her mind is going to come out. So you guys know that already. I think that was the flame. And Allie certainly wasn't a perfect child. She'll tell you that. But that flame is what Allie, as she got older, went to college and whatever, made her want to seek God's truth more as she matured. But the flame was put in there a long time ago. I think the other thing is, around age 16, Allie, it was me that I needed to understand what was a value for Allie that she had to respect as to be a part of our family, and what were just my preferences that I would like to see her follow. Unfortunately, before that time, I thought every preference I had was a value because I thought I was right. And so we went to a counselor that really helped us with this, is to understand, look, your family values are probably 4 or 5 total, and those are not negotiable. In fact, Allie and I would agree on those. Those are not an issue. But all of the other things were like, clean up your room, comb your hair, eat all your food on your plate. Those are preferences, okay, especially as they get into their teenage years. So just be careful about that. And then what do you love most about Allie? Well, I will tell you, there's 2 different things. First of all, I'm impressed the most by her ability to digest incredible amounts of information and communicate them in a way that we can understand. What I love about her the most is her soft heart, which shows in her love for Christ and her family. That's really what melts me, is when I see her, truly burdened for people and their salvation and their relationship, and then also the sweetness that she has with her little girls and Timothy and whatever. That really melts me on that. But I'm always amazed at how she can process information. She's kind of always been that way. It's incredible. And of course, her team here helps with a lot of that. It's anytime I come on, you guys need to know this. Anytime I come on, the information that they provide me about the subjects we're going to talk about, it's incredible. In fact, for me, for an old country boy like me, it's a little bit overwhelming. So I have to kind of narrow it down a little bit. And then let's see here. What's your advice for raising boys to become godly men? Well, I don't think there's one perfect answer. And I wrote all these down last night because I wanted to answer them and make sure I didn't mess up. A lot of raising kids is to understand their personality. There's an author out there by the name of Robert Rome. If you just look him up, he has a book on personalities, which is very, very good. It was in a sense life-changing for Lisa and I. Once we read that, first of all, we understood our own personalities. Okay, and Lisa and I are different. And then we understood our kids' personalities. Once you understand this, then you have an inside track on how they look at the world. Allie's oldest brother, Justin, and her are total opposites. Now, they share a lot in common from the standpoint of their biblical worldview, and they're both very smart and all that type of stuff. But Justin is super, super quiet, okay? In fact, we always used to joke that Justin was to come home one day and say, hey, I'm married and got 3 kids, and we never knew it, right? I mean, he's just that quiet. But there will be times when he will talk about a subject. And so I'll look for those times. And my goal is to make sure that I continue that conversation as long as possible. And usually there's an opportunity in there for me to put out some life lesson that maybe I've learned or something that equates to that. I don't try to force that on him. I wait until he's talking about a subject. Now, with Allie, you know, she's much more open than that. So I'm very comfortable about calling her or she calling me and just saying, hey, were you thinking about this? What'd you think about that? Those types of things. And so I think for guys, they're different than girls in a lot of ways. You just have to make sure that anytime you have an opportunity to put a life lesson without forcing it on them with a biblical worldview, that's what you do. And those things are remembered over time. I promise you that. I'll never forget. Justin told me one time, and this has probably been in the last 10 or 12 years, and it's something that you don't know, your kids are watching you, is that, and this is just kind of out of the blue, which is pretty unusual for him. He said, Dad, you know, one thing I appreciate about you is I've never heard you say a cross word about mom in front of anybody else. And I thought that was pretty nice of him to do that. But it also told me he's paying attention. Okay, a few more here. How do you ensure your kids could attend private Christian school financially? Lisa and I decided this well before we had any money. I can promise you that. And we decided that if I had to work 2 jobs, okay, that for our kids to get a Christian education, that's what I would do. Having a Christian education was our number one priority as a family. That was our number one financial priority, was our kids getting a Christian education. So I would say if you have the opportunity to do it, whatever you have to do to get that done would be important. It won't be perfect, but it will help to reinforce what you're teaching at home and what they're learning at church. I think it's very important. All right. How can I encourage spiritual growth in my husband while still submitting to him as his wife? Well, first of all, let me make this clear. You should never submit to an abusive husband, verbal or physical. Okay. Let's just make sure you understand that. That's not submission. Okay. So, and I'm not saying this person is having that challenge, but just as a general statement. But now I think what happens is, and this has happened to me over time with Lisa, is what your actions will make the biggest difference. All right. If you're nagging on that person, it's not going to work at all. But if he sees you praying, sees you in the word, sees you having a kind heart and a kind mouth, that's the best chance for his heart to open up enough. It just has to open a little bit to hear that knock of Jesus, because he says, I stand at the door and knock. And if you open, I will come in. So you don't have to have, it all the way open, just a little bit. And I think they can learn that. I know that, one thing that's always been important to me and had an influence on me is, how Lisa conducts herself. And she's not different on how she thinks and looks and does at home than she is out in public. And that's very, very important. And so I would encourage you to do that.
Last sponsor for the day is Patriot Mobile. While we may have won the election, the fight to restore our nation is only starting. So now is the time to take a stand with your dollar. And that is by switching to Patriot Mobile. They are the only Christian conservative wireless provider in the U.S. They provide excellent service and they make it really easy to switch. You get outstanding nationwide coverage because they operate on all 3 networks. So if you have cell phone service today, you can get cell phone service with Patriot Mobile with a coverage guarantee. But the dollars that you're spending at Patriot Mobile will go to support the things that we support, like the First and Second Amendment. Switching is really easy. Their 100% U.S.-based customer service team can help you out. Go to to patriotmobile.com/Allie. Use code Allie and you'll get a free month of service. patriotmobile.com/Allie, code Allie.
Okay, currently reading. What are you currently reading? All right, I got 3 or 4 of those. I've always got several things going on. Number 1 is Jesus, the High Road Leader by John Maxwell and Chris Hodges. Number 2, Every Good Endeavor by Tim Keller. And this is really about how you coincide your work with your faith. And it's really, really good. Of course, Tim Keller's a great writer. Revenge of the Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. Now, don't read this unless you've read The Tipping Point, okay? You got to read The Tipping Point. But this is kind of interesting. And Malcolm Gladwell is certainly far left of where I am and probably most of you are, but he is a very smart guy, and you do learn some things, non-political type things, when you read him. And then finally, Good Energy by Casey Means. And this is kind of all about health and healing and what have you. It's really an eye-opening book. Now, in the last part of the book, she gets a little new agey, which is, not my cup of tea, and I don't think yours either, but a lot of the stuff is solid. And the fact that she's an MD. See, I really believe in functional medicine, but I much more trust functional medicine people that have an MD because they have seen all the other side 100%. And when they come back over to natural healing and stuff, that to me, that carries a lot more weight. They're the most recent ones other than the Bible. And then they ask, what's helped? He says, other than the Bible, what books have helped grow and develop your faith? And for me, it was this one book. It's called The Jesus I Never Knew by Philip Yancey. That's a really, really good book, and it's very interesting. All right. How do you balance financial success and responsibility without loving money? Well, you have to look money strictly as a tool. And so it becomes how you use the tool. See, a hammer doesn't nail a nail by itself. It just sits there all day long. In fact, money, if you pulled out a dollar bill and you set it right here, it could sit there forever and not do one thing wrong or right. It just sits there. So it's a tool. It's how do you use it? If you use it destructively, which is focusing only on ourselves and our own fleshly desires, or constructively, certainly that means helping you and your family, but beyond that, benefiting others. That's really what it's all about. All right. Let's see here. I got time for maybe one more. How to form a good relationship with your son-in-law. That's a good one there, because that's something that Timothy, Allie's husband, is a lot like my oldest son, very quiet. So he's easy. He doesn't make it hard for me. He's not conflict-oriented necessarily. But I can take that for granted. So I have to be really careful about intentionally building that relationship. I had a good friend that I was asking about this actually last summer when Lisa and I were on a trip together with this friend of mine. And he said what he's done is he takes his son-in-law to lunch or breakfast once a month. And maybe they'll have a kind of almost like a book club where they'll be reading a book together, something to talk about. But he intentionally does that because the son-in-law, he's the father to your grandkids, right? And the husband to the daughter that you love as much as anything. And I think that's what we have to do. My goal in 2025 is to do that. And so, Timothy, if you happen to listen to this, hold me accountable to this as well, okay? So anyway, it's been a good time. I've enjoyed being here. Bree, I do have one question that wasn't on here that I know somebody asked, so I want you to answer it.
Okay, I'm ready.
Why was Taylor Swift not at the inauguration?
Somebody asked that?
No, I know. Well, there's
Someone
not one
has to
question
have asked
on
that.
Taylor Swift, and I know there had to be one in there somewhere.
Yeah, you're right. That's a great question because she backed Kamala Harris. But we'll get her one day, I think.
You think? Yeah, she's going to come around. I hope so.
Maybe if she marries Travis Kelce and they
now is she having a baby or not?
No, I don't think so.
I thought I read that somewhere but I think it's just speculation.
Yeah, I think it was a rumor.
Taylor, we're not saying that. I know you listen to this podcast. You just don't tell anybody, but we're not really saying that, okay?
Yeah.
One last question, though, Bree.
Okay.
Not related to Taylor Swift.
Okay.
I came in here expecting some fresh-made sourdough bread and nothing. I mean, I was so excited to hear what you're doing in the cooking range. That's going to be awesome.
I have not perfected it yet, but when I do,
please let me know.
I'll bring you some sourdough. I'll bring everyone some sourdough.
Yeah. Also, anybody, if you're interested in my book, life lessons from Little Red Wagon. They'll put it in the show notes. You can just email me. If you have other questions you want, I'm happy to answer them. Ron@ronsimmons.com. I'm happy to answer questions that you have on anything, right? Some of it I probably won't know that much about. But I appreciate being here today. And don't forget, Allie will be back on Monday. And thank you for your time today. I hope you enjoyed it.